we will convene the May 19th City of Santa Barbara Airport Commission meeting. Roll call, please.
Bruce Miller.
Here.
John Clark.
Here.
Chris Colbert. William Gilbert.
Here.
Patricia Griffin.
Here.
Kirk Martin.
Here.
Scott Tracy.
Here.
All right. Do we have any agenda changes?
No, Mr. Chair.
All right. Well, that brings us to public comments, where any member of the public may address the commission on the non-agenda items. We have a total of 15 minutes, and I see we have one request to speak from Gary Abbott of MAG Aviation Fuel.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Council, Commission, sorry. Done this before. Anyway, MAG Aviation Fuel, obviously, as you know, is a new vendor on the airport. We have gone through a lot to get here with the help, and great help, I should say, from airport administration. I wanted to pass on a very sincere thanks to them and the Airport Commission for taking the chance and allowing us to provide a service. And hopefully you guys will make you proud. So thank you so much for everybody included. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Yes, that was certainly an epic amount of effort, and we, like you, really appreciate being able to work with our airport administration. And good luck with that. All right, and we'll let the record show that Commissioner Colbert has joined us. And do we have any other public comment? All right. That brings us to notices that the Lease Review Subcommittee did meet on Thursday, May 13th at 11 a.m. in the Administration Building, and that on Thursday, May 13th at 5 p.m. the Airport Commission Secretary duly posted this agenda on the bulletin board at Airport Administration. And that brings us to the consent calendar. Do we have any changes, withdrawals from the consent calendar?
I need to recuse myself from one of the leases. So I'm not sure how we.
So we
vote
will
on them
take
separately.
is that the JM
Yes.
Roofing? So we will pull the JM Roofing from the consent calendar for a separate consideration. And with the that particular item removed, that leaves the minutes, airline operating permit with Frontier, the Dynison lease, the consent to sublease Twin Lakes Golf Course, and Northrop Grumman Corporation Astro Aerospace lease agreement property management report. Any discussion on the consent calendar? All right.
Move for approval? That we do? No, we don't want to do that.
All right. All in favor of approving the consent calendar?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. The consent calendar is approved. And that brings us to the item number 6, which was asked to be separately considered. And we have one, we'll show that Commissioner Griffin, I spelled that right, has recused herself, and that the board or the commission approved the lease agreement with JM Roofing Company, doing business as Action Roofing.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve said item.
All in favor of approving the lease with JM Roofing?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Second?
You need one. A motion, and then you needed a second.
I second.
I heard a second.
I said it quietly.
We're going fast.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I'll try and keep up.
All right. And with the consent calendar out, that brings us to the liaison reports. And we do have our City of Santa Barbara liaison, Councilmember Grant House. Good evening.
Good evening. I want to say, first of all, that I'm only here to make Ed Easton look bad. No, it's just a joke from last time. In any case, I'm here to report that the airport director and assistant director and operations manager made a report to the city council. And I know there was a little concern that was raised here about how the city council might receive the report on the budget from the airport. But I believe that there was a really favorable reception and a lot of real interest in what's going on here at the airport. And I thought I'd just give you that feedback. Of course, it's not over yet, but we're working real hard, meeting after meeting after meeting. Also, very interesting, what you just did a moment ago. I just want to appreciate you for being so careful about recusing yourself, Ms. Griffin. That was really great. And Mr. Gilbert was at a meeting, I think, this afternoon at the Faulkner Gallery, where our city administrator and our city attorney gave a briefing on just that very thing. Did anyone else manage to get there? Yeah, you guys were there? Great. Serving on a board or a commission is a real important responsibility, and knowing when to do this exact thing, like you just did, is critically important for meeting the requirements of the Brown Act. And one of the things that didn't get mentioned, which I think this group really excels at, and that is excellence in customer service. You are very much the face of the city when you're interacting with the community at large, and when you conduct these meetings, and the spirit in which you conduct your meetings is something is really appreciated. And we didn't mention that at the meeting today. And I talked with Paul Casey, Community Development Director, and we're going to be adding that to our future meetings to really just appreciate people for stepping up, but secondly to remind them that they do represent the city in everything they do. So anyway, thank you very much. That's it. Any questions for the city council guy? All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'd like to add that Councilmember Easton did call me this afternoon with his regrets. Not to outdo my boss over there. Just to mention it.
All right, thank you. He's with us in spirit this evening. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. And Commission Matters, number 11. I have been requested to appoint 2 commissioners to serve with myself on an ad hoc committee to assist staff in planning for the airline terminal project grand opening event. And I happen to know that we have 2 commissioners, at least, who are very talented in that area and have had a lot of experience in events such as this through maybe their zoo activities. So I would like to ask Commissioner Griffin and this guy over here, Commissioner Martin,
Well done.
to join me on the grand opening event planning task force or work group.
I'd be delighted.
As would I.
All right.
Be my honor.
Thank you very much. I know your experience with your other civic activities will serve us well at that group.
We did a good party.
All right. Number 12, administrative reports. The lease agreement with Ann and Donald Cole doing business as San Marcos Farms.
We brought this item as a separate issue because, unhappily, this is the first time I've ever had to come before this board and ask you to approve a lease at less than market value. And I hope I never have this experience again. But we do have a building that was initially intended to be torn down when Parcel 22 was developed, and since that hasn't happened yet, we still have the building and we have a tenant in it that requested to rent some additional space that we had considered unleasable and had not been leased for several years. After doing a fire inspection on the 28th, we determined that for the use the tenant was going to put the space to, which is essentially storage of B boxes, that the space could be considered rentable, but because of the condition of the building, could not be rented at market rate. So we're asking that you approve a lease with Ann and Donald Cole for a total monthly rental of $1,728 exclusive of utilities, and that includes 3 sections of the building, B, C, and D.
And as was mentioned, the lease review subcommittee did review this item. We saw photographs of the subject property. It is, as described, in a rather exceptional condition. And I believe that it was the unanimous opinion of the lease subcommittee that did seem appropriate or not inappropriate given the condition of the property.
Could you just enlighten us as to how the rate was determined?
The rate for Unit C has actually been determined starting when the tenant came in 1955 and with regular CPI increases over that particular number of years. Unit D was actually on a permit that followed a few years after the tenant initially moved in and was at a flat rate. And the tenant requested that, since the use was similar, that Unit B be rented at the same rate as Unit D.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, during the lease review committee was ascertained that, that there's going to be sufficient language in the month-to-month agreement to address that the space is being leased as is, whereas that we're not obligating ourselves to replacing major capital improvements, that, in essence, the tenant is at risk, and that the space hasn't been leased in how many years?
Gosh, at least 5, I think. But the tenant was given a tour of the space prior to the time that at the time that they requested that they lease the space, and was made aware of the fact that it would be leased in the condition that it is in. And all of our leases do contain a hold harmless and indemnity clause that protects the city not only against known defects, but latent defects and even negligence.
And I think this was mentioned, it was previously considered unrentable, so this is not taking it out of the existing rental pool.
So it's a win-win situation. And can I also ask, it's not going to be open for public?
No, there would be no public access to this space. The tenant is
Storage only?
it's just storage. There's no plumbing in the space, no heating in the space. It's just electrical, and it would be all just dead storage.
And this would commence when upon approval?
June 1.
I'd like to move that we accept it.
Second?
Okay, all in favor of approving the lease agreement?
Aye.
All right. Opposed? All right, the lease agreement with Ann and Donald Cole doing business at San Marcos Farms is approved by the Airport Commission. And at number 13, status report on the airline terminal construction project. A lot of stuff going on over there.
Grown an evergreen, so that's a good sign.
Yeah, right.
It's been topped out.
Christmas tree and an American flag.
Yep,
Interesting.
It's traditional.
that's tradition.
High rises, but
Well, hey.
A couple of weeks ago, I gave a presentation to City Council to kind of give them a pictorial update on where the airline terminal construction is at this point. And so I thought I'd share that presentation with you. And the project now is 20% complete, and we've used about 17% of our change order allowance. This is the construction schedule. This is listed on our website, and I'll repeatedly, through my presentation, encourage yourself and the public to go to flysba.com, and there's a section on the terminal project, and it will give updates in terms of where we are, both in picture and in video, as well as the construction schedule. So I don't expect you to memorize this as I go through the presentation, The part in yellow is where we are right now. They're erecting the steel structure, which is pretty well along the way. And within the next couple of weeks, we'll be pouring the concrete deck on the second floor, and then also setting the electrical transformer and permanent power to the building. And this is these are the activities that will take place this summer and fall through November. And sorry about that. And this is the winter-spring schedule. And then, of course, we're looking into moving into the terminal, or the tenants, making their improvements February, is that right? Through November through January. And then finishing the project about this time or April of next year. It says March, but we still have a ways to go. These are just some photos that were taken of construction in the last 30 days. There were 30 truckloads of steel taken to the site, and it was about 1.3 million pounds of steel. And of course, this is a very sturdy building because it's been designed for earthquake and wind forces. So if there's an earthquake, I'd run there. This is part of the slab being poured. And the roof plates being put on the building. And those type of plates are on the second floor right now. And then when they pour the concrete on the second floor, the concrete goes in those slots kind of thing. I'm not exactly sure. That's the extent of my construction knowledge. This is facing the front of the terminal from street side. And if you compare it to the rendering, you can kind of see it really taking shape. This is from air side. And the north view, if you were looking out the window, you'd be looking at the mountains. South view, that's where the loading dock is. So it kind of helps give some perspective to the kind of structural bones that you're looking at. The activities, we've been meeting numerous occasions with the airlines to finalize their layout of their space, which of course is important to the contractor in terms of putting in the drains and electrical plugs and all that kind of stuff. Meeting with the TSA to finalize the layout of the passenger and check bag screening. And right after we completed design and the TSA confirmed that we had what they needed, they changed their rules or requirements. And so we had to shuffle around quite quickly and adjust the space so that we fit their requirements. City Council recently awarded the bid for the glass passenger boarding bridges. We'll have 3 of them to open when we open the building, and then hopefully we'll wait till the end of the project, and if there's money left over that we may be able to afford the 4th, we'll see how it goes. But with 3, I think we'll be able to do a good job of servicing the flights we have right now. Baggage conveyor system, the bid was, council awarded that bid as well, and this is the conveyor system that takes your baggage from the front counter when you check it in to back of house through TSA check bag screening out to the baggage handlers who put it on their carts and take it out to the aircraft. The flight information displays are, the specifications are being developed right now, so that's kind of where we are with that. The passenger seating, we have selected a Herman Miller chair. It won't be in black like this. It'll be a brown leatherette to match our decor. But we aren't ordering the chairs until closer to the time the terminal opens, so we don't have to store them in the meantime. The concession program, we have selected proposed concessionaires for both food and beverage and news and gift, and that's all I'll say because the item following this one, it has that in detail. The public arts program, we have selected two artists for 3 commissioned art pieces. We have one artist that will be doing the wrought iron railing embellishments, and they are doing a kind of Santa Barbara kelp motif. Apparently, the Santa Barbara kelp forests and kelp beds are world-renowned, and so that's kind of an interesting fact I learned. The medallion and the wood beam stenciling will be done by the same artist team. The restoration of the courthouse lantern is in progress, and that is also on our website. Our city TV did a video of the restoration of that lantern, which is quite interesting. We are also working with the Santa Barbara Arts Alliance program. They have youth that are at risk and engage them in different art projects and other kinds of community projects. And they have designed and are painting a mural, which I saw this afternoon, to go on our construction fence. And the design that they chose were postcards, giant postcards, depicting aviation and the airport. And so I think they're doing a very, very good job. So I look forward to seeing that up on our fence. And again, I would refer anybody to check our website at flysba.com, and we are trying our best to keep it updated with photos as well as information about the project. And that's it.
Okay. Questions? I know I had one. You went by that first slide rather quickly, where you stated, I believe it was, that you're 20% through the construction, and 17% of the change order amounts. Okay. Make sure I had that one correctly.
Oh.
Okay. All right. Okay. Other questions, observations?
Mr. Chair, Karen, what is the anticipated date that the structure is going to be weather tight? Where your glazing's in and doors are up, and just in terms of timing on
Winter?
Winter, yeah.
I don't know exactly. We're pretty weather resistant right now. One of
Right.
the things that they want to do before the winter sets in, though, is the road.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
anything that pertains to that. So I'm not exactly sure what the schedule is. I have to look at this chart here.
Yeah, the timing of the roadway is
Drywall, September,
September,
October.
so it should be, you look fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the roadways, obviously, you want to time that beyond your heavy construction so they're not tearing up the new pavement.
Right. Right.
Okay, that looks great.
Yeah. I
Thank you.
encourage you to drive by. It's kind of fun to see. Yeah. Let's run by.
Okay. Other questions? All right. Thank you. Very nice pictures and information. Okay. Item 14, the food and beverage and retail concession agreements. This was also a subject of the lease review subcommittee. And do we have a presentation on that?
Yes, we do.
All right.
Mr. Chair. Oh, Karen wants me to mention that we have storyboards on the table between us, and also a display here next to Tracy of some of the design elements for the concession space. So feel free to walk around, look. I also have copies of the proposals if you're interested, along with the concession design guideline manual. So, okay. Tonight we're going to a little agenda for the presentation, if you will. Discuss background on concessions, provide you with our overall strategy for the RFP development for concessions, go through our process, and examine each one of the submittals in detail, and also talk about some of the important lease provisions. Concessions, airport concessions are essential for travelers. They provide for a variety of needs, including food, business, and entertainment. Well-managed concessions are important, especially the customer service aspect, help to improve the travel experience. While this for our airport is not the largest revenue source, it is an important one for the airport. And with the new terminal, it's the very first time that we've actually had enlarged concession space, and also, most importantly, had the space where it needs to be post-security, so that you actually capture the audience of the travelers. The design space, when it was incorporated into the overall design, we did think about the sense of place and made sure that it was consistent with the other design elements of the new terminal. Our strategy for the program to select or entice concessions for the terminal, since we are a very small airport generally, we wanted to make sure that we had as much advertising and outreach as possible. So we began with an actual meeting last December, an airport outreach meeting with any local, regional, and national vendors. We solicited their attendance so that we could talk about the experience of operating in an airport as opposed to a street-type retail or food and beverage concession. There are differences, as you well know, that you have a captured audience. You have hours of operation that are pretty unbelievable, beginning at 4:30 in the morning and then going all the way till 8 or 9 o'clock at night. You really don't get a day off because the airport operates 24/7, and the concessions are required to do that as well. So we wanted to give full knowledge of the operation, but we also wanted to provide information about what this process actually meant, what was required for build-out of tenant spaces, what the actual lease agreement would look like, and the requirements that are set forth in those agreements, and then the RFP and the review and evaluation criteria, and letting them know that there were opportunities, but it was not as easy as it might appear. So when we held the meeting, we had about 50 people. It shouldn't be about, but an estimate of about 50 folks showed up. There was lots of excitement, lots of questions. A lot of local businesses participated. And we also called upon our airline consultant, Jacobs Consultancy, to help us convey the differences in the operation of an airport versus the street. We were looking for a diversity because, as you know, FAA requires that the airport promote opportunities for disadvantaged businesses, and we were doing that. And so we did have a good turnout, and we were quite pleased with that. Then, before we issued the actual RFP document, we knew that we had to have the concession design manual, because with a brand new building, we wanted to make sure that anybody who was doing a tenant improvement did it the way it needed to be consistent with our construction. So we hired HNTB on a separate purchase order to work with the design architect Fred Sweeney with Phillips, Mitch, Sweeney, and Moore. So the design guideline manual was produced. It really is quite attractive, and that was a major element in the RFP. These are the spaces. You'll recall we have one space downstairs. The lower view is the downstairs element for food and beverage. Upstairs, past security, post-security, we have 3 retail locations, and we also have an expanded 1,900 square feet for food and beverage. So we actually made 2 RFPs, one for food and beverage and one for retail, because there were some differences and some special items that we wanted to identify. And we sent the RFP out to everyone who attended the outreach meeting. We also advertised on our website, submitted copies of the RFP to known airport concession vendors like that are listed in a AAAE membership book. In the RFP, of course, as you know, we told them what our schedule was, when we were going to have our mandatory pre-bid meeting, when proposals were due, and our anticipated schedule for bringing the proposals to Airport Commission as well as City Council. It also included business terms, both the financial capability of the companies as well as a request for us for revenue and percentages, and as I mentioned earlier, the draft concession agreement. Pre-proposal meeting was held. We had one for each. And having had 50 people at the outreach meeting, it was sort of disheartening to have the pre-proposal meetings, because we actually had 3 individuals for the food and beverage and then 1 for the gift or the retail. But we were not set back. We provided all of the information as though we had a crowd and went over all of the elements and answered any questions that they might have. So when proposals were received on April 1st, we had one proposal, as I said, from First Class Concessions, Inc. for the food and beverage. Our current food and beverage vendor at the terminal, SSP America, acquired our unit about 2.5 years ago, and they declined. They recently were awarded a food and beverage concession at LAX, quite large. I believe they told me multi-millions, if not billion-dollar improvements. The retail for news and gift, our current operator was the only submittal. So we formulated our evaluation committee as the RFP indicated. We met, we went over, first we made sure that the submittals met the minimum qualifications it did, and then we sat down and we looked at their concept and design and their financials and their proposal for financial information. The first proposal, and I might say that the committee concurred that the 2 submittals did meet the basic requirements that we had requested. First Class Concessions has teamed with Bee Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf. They actually have a franchise agreement and will have 2 locations for coffee, bean, and tea, one downstairs, and then upstairs it will be next to the Costa Terraza Tapas Bar. The proposed capital investment for the Bee Coffee Bean and Tea is $164 per square foot, where the restaurant and bar is $216 per square foot. That's their estimate of what it will take to build it out. First Class Concessions has, their team has more than 40 years of experience in concessions, airport concessions. They're based in San Diego, which is good for us. They currently operate in 5 small and medium hub airports. They have 2 in Florida, Panama City and St. Petersburg, Clearwater. They have Fort Wayne, Indiana, Oklahoma City, and then they also have Phoenix, Sky Harbor. And in Phoenix, Sky Harbor, they have the Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf there as well. They are FAA certified, 100% disadvantaged business enterprise, and all of their financial documents were complete and in order. Upstairs.
What does that mean? I'm not familiar with that term, disadvantage.
It's a woman-owned business. There's a criteria that's established through the state of California that you can submit your documentation on the size of your business, the ownership of the business, and be qualified as a disadvantaged business enterprise. And FAA requires that airports have a policy and a program for that to encourage contracts, whether it's through AIP, improvement projects, construction projects, or through concessions, that we reach out and encourage disadvantaged business enterprises to either provide a proposal, partner with someone, or provide materials and supplies. Like the rent-a-cars, as an example, can buy tires from a small business or a DBE and meet that qualification.
I didn't know if that was referring to the employees that they would be hiring, which could possibly conflict with security issues, or I didn't know what the term meant, so
No.
thank you.
But Hazel, just to clarify, it's not an absolute requirement. That didn't dissuade the other 49 people from submitting.
No.
Okay.
No, not at all. Back to the restaurant, the menu for the full-service restaurant and bar upstairs, they will provide breakfast, lunch, dinner, sweets, desserts. It's quite extensive to cover all the items, but it's not, it's doable. It's a doable menu. The coffee, bean, and tea will have basically the same services that they provide on the street in downtown Santa Barbara. And we'll have both locations, especially upstairs in the hold room area, they will have prepackaged goods so that you can grab them and take them on the plane as you rush to your new glass boarding bridge. The performance statement, in both cases, because the economy's been off, and as you know, our employments have been down, both of the proposals were very conservative in their estimating of proposed rental revenues and the rental as well. As an example, with first-class concessions, they wanted to base their payments to us based on our employments. And so they're estimating, in this example, say we have 400,000 employments, they're going to generate $3 per employment, $1.2 million, and then they would return to the airport $114,200. That compares to our current past year, 2009. Excuse me, I don't have that on a slide. It's a 55% increase in sales and 111% increase in revenue to the airport, which is good. As far as the agreement, each concession was offered a 10-year term. The initial term is from the time we execute the agreement until we open the new terminal. That allows them to do their permitting and get the construction done in their tenant improvements and test all the equipment and whatever testing that we need to do to make sure that they're operational on the day that we open. When we open, their primary term of 10 years begins. There is a base rental, $36,000 for food and beverage. Vanna. Percentage rental. They did request that the coffee, bean, and tea leaf, because it is a specialty and it is a franchise, and there are special costs associated with that operation, that the percentage return to the airport be established if we have less than 250,000 passengers at 7%. Anything over that, keep it at 8% return to the airport. Food and beverage downstairs would be $10 or 10% or 12% based on employments. And then upstairs, once again, the coffee remains the same. Food and beverage at 10, going to 12, alcohol at 12, going to 15. A question has been raised about pricing policy for both any of the concessions. And included in the draft agreement that went out as part of the RFP process and is included still, all items that are for sale, whether it's at the gift shop or at the restaurant, it's required that they not be more than 10% of street pricing. Because the question was raised, we did have Rebecca checked with 11 Western airports. She did a survey. They all have the same type of provisions, annual and they literally go out on the street, price their product, bring it back in, provide that documentation to the airport director, and then she or he gets to approve it. And they do that on an annual basis so that we stay in sync with what's on the street and what current prices might allow. These two locations are the premises for the new food and beverage upstairs and downstairs, a total of 2,900 square feet, 1,000 down and 1,900 upstairs. The lease provides that they have an obligation to construct and stay on schedule, provide a bond for that construction that will be held for a year afterwards in case there's any problems. Additionally, 5 years into the agreement, they need to refurbish, maybe change a concept, and that's provided for, and there's a dollar amount listed for each of the concessions for that. The other provisions are, we establish standards of operation. We make clear that there's no partnership between the airport and the tenant, but we do have levels of service that we want met, and we have identified those in the agreement. Another important policy adopted by the city and incorporated in the Airport's Planning Commission approvals was a requirement for a solid waste management program, trash recycling, and this food scrap program, and that also is part of this agreement. The other provisions are the routine, ordinary ones. The retail concession, ME Incorporated, it used to be Marine Earhart. That is right, Marine Earhart. Santa Barbara News and Gifts. This is their concept. This is located directly across from the upstairs restaurant and bar. It comes with the walls. It is designed in the terminal to have the whole shell is there. In both cases, the shell will be provided with the roof and the floor and the walls. And this is their concept for the gift shop. And they're proposing, because most of the work's already done, $50 per square foot for their improvements and equipment and furnishing. They've been in Santa Barbara at our airport for 27 years. They are also certified DBE. They have local businesses, the Reed and Post in Montecito, Front Page in Goleta, and they used to have the Enlightened sites down at Paseo Nuevo. In addition to the magazines and reading material, they're providing other important products for travelers, combs and brushes and toothpaste and over-the-counter medications, Santa Barbara souvenirs. They're also working to get hopefully C's candy, which I think would be a real good seller for the airport, and possibly selling Santa Barbara wines. Since you're already through security, you can take it on the airplane in your bag. Right, Tracy?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Currently.
Wait for it.
This week.
They changed their mind.
That's right. So this has the same term, initial term and primary term of 10 years. Their annual base rental is $12,000. Their percentage for news, once again on news, it's flat because the gift shop does not increase the price that's published on a magazine or newspaper or a book. They sell it for what it is. Gifts and Sundries has a graduated percentage, and I must tell you that last year they grossed $456,000, and they were back and forth. Remember, they were in gates 8 and 9, then they went back to the lobby. Mm-hmm. So they really will do much better, I think, than their pro forma indicates. But even so, even if they do just the $500,000, it's still an increase of 21% per in-plane passenger, which is really something. Pricing policy is in this agreement as well as in the food and beverage. It says the same thing about the procedure and the approval process. They're in the 885 square feet unit. The other two that are remaining for retail, we can either do another solicitation later on, or we can negotiate. We can go out and negotiate with a potential vendor, which we'll probably want to do once we get up and operational, but that's our choice. Same provision on construction, same requirement for a construction bond, in the midterm upgrade for the space. And the other levels of service and standards that we will incorporate in the document. And they too have trash and recycling provisions. No food scraps, but trash. That concludes my presentation. Be happy to answer questions and hope that you'll recommend approval.
Well, thank you for the very detailed presentation. I think it was seemed to be a very thorough process you went through, and it's unfortunate we didn't have more respondents, but I really applaud your rigor in going through the process as you did. And I'm sure there'll be lots of questions.
Mr. Chair, Hazel, I support the chairman's comments, and I want to just illustrate or emphasize that the lease sub-review committee did review this in greater detail, and I'm satisfied that personally they've done an excellent job in screening the tenants and for all the appropriate questions. One of the things that I think we need to be concerned about is that we're starting fresh. These are people that are going to be they're providing an experience to our passengers, and if we all recognize if they have a bad experience at the restaurant, then it reflects on the airport, reflects on the city, and I'm satisfied that everybody gets it. With concern to this retail environment that's being created here, we want to make sure that the lease gives the right for the airport to update its design guidelines so that 5 years from now, pursuant to the lease structure, that those mandated capital investments are in line with the current styles. And the last thing you want is something that's outdated and old. And just to clarify a few things in my mind, the lease structure, like any of our leases, requires the tenants to provide their own or reimburse the airport for its own utilities?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And that the base rent has probably some cost of living adjustment along the way?
I don't believe
Just
so.
remain flat at $36,000 a year.
Right.
All right, so you're relying on the gross sales as your escalator. Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
More questions?
I'd just like to comment that I think the process was so detailed, and I certainly came away from the subcommittee meeting that feeling comfortable that you had a process that was brought about as many people into the process as we possibly could. And hopefully we got the right selection and we'll be successful.
Thank you.
And certainly there are steps ahead in dealing with the city for permitting and so forth, and hopefully that will all go smoothly, because we all really want to be sure it's all there when the terminal opens.
Exactly.
I believe we may have a comment from Councilmember Howard.
Yes, thank you, Chair Miller. One of the things that was of real interest at the City Council was that the cost of at Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf, for instance, or a restaurant, that the experience there would be consistent from a pricing perspective to what you would expect, say, on downtown and State Street. And that was once again one of the one of our concerns was that people could come here and they could have something completely different from what they would have expected in terms of cost. And I'm really glad to see we didn't get this amount of detail, but we were reassured that the contract dealt with that adequately, and I'm glad to see that. It's the council's interest, just like you had said, that this is a real welcoming experience, and they're sent off or in style too if they're on their way home, and it's all consistent with our welcoming hospitality of the city of Santa Barbara. Anyway, thank you very much for covering that base.
Thanks.
It's certainly reassuring that both of these operators do have experience in this environment. Yes.
Right. One other point, too, just to clarify, as you know, it is a 10-year lease, so it does require going to City Council and the adoption of an ordinance to go with these two documents. So once Airport Commission approves, then it'll go to City Council.
It was a very thorough presentation, and I wouldn't be surprised if after the terminal is open that the other two kiosks would be solicited by a business or two to fill those.
I hope.
So the vetting process is good practice.
Good. Thank you.
I'd like to move that we accept the proposal.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion that we approve the leases?
You want a motion?
I have a motion and a second. Okay, no further discussion? All in favor of the approval of the lease with first-class concessions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, approved. Thank you. All right, and I think that brings us to the director's report.
Okay. Well, again, I'll point out a few of the items on the report that I want to bring to your attention, and if you have any other items that I don't mention, please feel free to ask. Our passenger count for April was down 1.4% compared to April of 2009, and year-to-date we're down 2.6%. The only good news I could say about that is that we're improving and having less decrease, I guess. Trying to say that in the right way. And airports across the country, when I'm reading, some are doing better than others in terms of recovery. So I think hopefully we can sustain small decreases and start edging our way back up. June 4th, Frontier Airlines begins nonstop service to Denver. So encourage people to try that out. And I do believe they have some introductory fares, so I'd encourage you to go to their website and check that out. Let's see, our self-serve fueling station is up and running, and I just wanted to encourage everyone that has an aircraft and fuels them and is willing to fuel them themselves to buy fuel and support this new business on the airport. Our airport T hangars are full, but we'll be having our next lottery event at your June meeting. I know you're anxiously awaiting that.
Well, let's hope we have more than one so we can use the lottery machine.
Well, I'll let you use it anyway.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And I think those are the items that I was going to point out, but if you have others, I'd be happy to address them.
Further questions?
I did see a comment on airnav.com about the self-serve fuel. So we're getting some feedback from the community.
Great.
That's getting out to
Good.
pilots.
And we're looking for ways that they can promote themselves as well as ways that the airport can help them. So we want them to be successful.
Okay.
I do have an item.
Oh, yes.
Just to the extent that you can elaborate on item D under Council Airport Commission actions, closed door sessions involving a 10-acre lease. Do I have to?
Okay. We had received a proposal to lease about 10 acres within the airfield for a solar installation development. And Council has directed staff to, when we do our request for proposal for the long-term parking lot solar canopies, to add any additional potential sites for that type of activity that we may have. So right now we're evaluating what sites might be available. The airfield site gave me some concerns just because of its location. So anyway, we're in the process of doing that, and when we get more of our information together, I'll bring that back to you as well as City Council.
Okay.
Okay. Yes.
Karen, is there any, like you had this airport proposal came up to the city council, came up kind of quick. Is there any presentations during this next period that you know of to the city council of any of our works, businesses? In other words, are we going to be anything before the planning, any discussion, or any more, any more things with the council?
I understand what you're saying. Not for the near, as far as I can see right now for the near term. However, I think you have, Commissioner Gilbert has talked to me about letting you know when we're going before either council or the different commissions so that commissioners can come and support our efforts if you're available. And I'll certainly do that. I think that's a great idea and I really appreciate it.
Excellent. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, well, if there are no further questions, comments, thank you all for joining us, and we will adjourn.